Hi, this is Matt Paulson again. This is another video dealing with January 6th, the incursion riot that happened on Capitol grounds. And then also we're going to focus on FBI and the FBI's testimony in dealing with January 6th and other aspects of how the FBI has been politicized. I wanted to talk about how they missed the mark when they blew it on Capitol grounds on January 6th. I also want to talk about a few things that they are missing the mark on other things and just screwing up left and right. But first, we have a little snippet from CNN, and I wanted this to show my daughter how fair and balanced they are. They're just such a loving organization, and they always tell facts. They never slant the evidence. Now, I say that mockingly, but watch this.
To coup or not to coup? That is the question.
Jim, I always love being on with you because we're always talking about my former political party, and I think we're all just having a hard time wrapping our arms around the fact that this is who this party is. I mean, that was a crazy thing, right? A January 6th defendant in a mock jail cell. But what does that mean? That means everybody at CPAC, they don't believe January 6th was a big deal or a bad thing. And that's where the base is. And again, we go through this exercise every week or two. The country needs to understand that my former political party is fully anti-democracy. It is a fascist political party. It is a political party that embraces authoritarianism. We got to move on now and just defeat them.
So Joe Walsh is anti-Republican, even though he ran for the Republican primary back in 2020. He only got 1% of the vote in Iowa. Is very bitter, so he left the Republican organization, and now he's saying all kinds of weird things like Republicans are undemocratic, they are totally against democracy, and they are advocates of embracing authoritarianism. That's strange. Strange words from a former Republican. Okay, so this is my take on the FBI Director Christopher Wray comments to Congress. It's a deeply troubling. FBI Director admits alleged bias on Hunter Biden probe. That's one item. The other item is the January 6th investigation. The FBI is politicized, and this is the proof for that.
Intelligence analyst Brian Otan covered up derogatory information about Mr. Hunter Biden.
When I read the letter that describes the kinds of things that you're talking about, I found it deeply troubling.
Okay, next segment, talk about January 6th. Listen what he has to say.
One of the most outrageous examples of violence against law enforcement occurred right here in the U.S. Capitol complex on January 6, 2021, when an insurrectionist mob attacked the men and women who were trying to defend me and us in this building. The net result of it, at least 5 people died and over 140 law enforcement were injured.
That's really sad. No one should die in a riot. But that's the way it happened. Brian Stechnick was a Capitol policeman. He was injured on January 6th and he died January 7th. Ashley Babbitt was shot in the neck point blank by Capitol Police. He said he was defending the Capitol, but yet, why didn't you shoot other protesters? Kevin Greenson had a heart attack, and Roseanne Boylan was crushed by the crowd, and Benjamin Phillips died of a stroke.
It has resulted in, I think, the largest prosecution in Department of Justice history. The numbers now are 850 suspects have been arrested. But the FBI is still trying to identify more than 350 suspects believed to have committed violent acts on the Capitol grounds. That is the same number of unidentified suspects that were reported 10 months, 1 year, and 14 months after the event. What has made it so difficult to identify these 350 additional suspects?
Well, I think in some instances, a lot of the initial people that we were able to find and arrest and charge made themselves widely visible and easily identifiable on social media or otherwise.
The first question to the director should have been, what the heck were you doing when this riot broke out and the attack took place on Capitol grounds. Where were you? Why weren't you prepared? Why didn't your intelligence pick this up? Bad planning by the FBI.
One of the other elements was whether or not the FBI and others should have been forewarned of what was going to occur on January 6th. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I would say two things. One, we and DHS were both throughout 2020 putting out intelligence products warning about the prospect of different forms of politically motivated violence, including related to the election, including even after the election, potentially related to January 6th. But it is also the reality that we did not have, I think, any specific credible intelligence that pointed to thousands of people breaching the Capitol.
So you underestimated the riot or protest that Trump supporters were going to make, and you didn't know about any kind of approach of the Capitol grounds. And you just were unprepared. You were overwhelmed, you mismanaged, and you did a piss poor job. So do you have any excuses?
And so one of the things that we are determined to do on our part, to make sure we can do our part to make sure that nothing like that ever happens again, is to see how we can go about developing better sources. Anytime in the intelligence field, when there is any kind of successful attack, we make a point of trying to figure out, are there better ways to develop sources, higher quality sources, etc. So we're doing that now.
That is one very lame excuse.
By any means, but it seems to me that the use of artificial intelligence by other agencies has made this a more efficient operation. Is that being considered by the FBI?
Absolutely, you're spot on that artificial intelligence is, just as it is in the private sector and in other fields, artificial intelligence is an incredibly important tool. The FBI, just like other organizations, has a big data problem, and artificial intelligence is an important tool as we go forward to being better at getting through the mountains of information that's out there in a more efficient and effective way.
In other words, the FBI just completely missed the ball with the artificial intelligence, and that they weren't able to discover all the coordination that was happening online.
Mr. Chairman, Director Wray, I'm deeply concerned that the FBI and the Department of Justice have become thoroughly politicized. And I think it continues and is even worse today under the Biden administration. Yesterday, it was reported that Project Veritas had obtained a copy of an FBI training material, which listed various symbols and themes which, in the FBI's estimation, were indicative of, quote, militia violent extremism. Now, these symbols weren't things like the Ku Klux Klan or the Nazi Party, which naturally would be symbols of that, but instead they included, rather astonishingly, patriotic symbols of our nation and our history. Included on this list is the Betsy Ross flag. We have President Barack Obama, who was sworn in directly underneath two Betsy Ross flags. Also on this list is the Gadsden flag as a symbol of violent extremism. Now, the state of Virginia has a license plate for the Gadsden flag, as do many other states. I think people would be astonished to find that having that license plate, the FBI indicates that you're a violent extremist. Also included on this is a text that I was particularly struck, is the Gonzales battle flag. Come and take it. As indicative of being a violent extremist militia. Well, I will self-report right now that every day in the Senate I wear my boots that have the Gonzales battle flag on the back of them. Director Wray, what are y'all doing? This makes no sense. Do you agree with this FBI guidance that the Betsy Ross flag and the Gadsden flag and the Gonzales battle flag are signs of militia violent extremism?
Well, Senator, I'm not familiar with the particular document you have behind you, and I'm not in the practice of trying to comment on documents that I haven't recognized, but I will tell you that when we put out intelligence products, including ones that reference symbols, which we do
across a wide variety of contexts, we usually take great pains to put caveats and warnings in the document to make clear that a symbol alone is not considered evidence of violent extremism, and it's...
Well, but Director Wray, you don't include things like Antifa, you don't include things like Black Lives Matter. Instead, you identify patriotic Americans as suspects. And I would note there's a pattern of this. As you're aware, the National Association of School Boards asked the Attorney General to investigate parents as domestic terrorists under the Patriot Act. Since that time, the National Association of School Boards has apologized for the letter because it was so indefensible, but that hasn't stopped the FBI. In fact, you created a specific threat tag directed at parents. So let me ask you, how many moms and dads who have spoken up at school boards has the FBI interviewed or investigated since the memo from the Attorney General?
Well, first off, I'll say I'm not aware of any. But second, let me address the issue.
You're not aware of any? Like, the House of
If you would let me-
Representatives has written you and asked
If
you.
you would let me.
So please answer.
Let me say to you and to this committee the same thing I said to every FBI field office after I read the memo, which was that the FBI is not going to be in the business of investigating speech or policing speech at school board meetings or anywhere else, and that we're not about to start now.
Recently, there was the case against individuals charged with kidnapping and murdering Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. That case ended up an absolute debacle where the 4 people who went to trial, 2 of them were acquitted, 2 received mistrials. None of them were convicted on even a single charge, and the basis of the defense was entrapment, that the FBI, that paid enforcements for the FBI, had suggested and had incited the conduct. Let me ask you, how many FBI agents were disciplined or reprimanded after that disastrous case and the misconduct that led to every defendant being acquitted or having mistrial in every charge?
Senator, I can't comment on a personnel matter. I can tell you that that case, as I understand it, is now pending a retrial, as I understand it.
Well, the special agent in charge of that case has now been sent to D.C., to the Washington, D.C. office, and now leads the investigation regarding January 6th. Is that correct?
That doesn't sound right to me.
That does not sound right. The name of the individual is Stephen D'Antonio. He was run out of the FBI Detroit field office. And by the way, I will point out that the lead investigator, Special Agent Track, are you aware that he was apparently fired for allegedly beating his wife after coming home from a swingers party, and he'd made multiple derogatory political posts about President Trump showing political bias? Are you aware of that?
I am aware of, I think, the incident you're describing and action that was taken about it. To clarify the first part of your question, Mr. D'Antuono was the special agent in charge of the office, the Detroit field office, and is now the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office. I thought you were asking about the agent who was responsible for these.
So the guy in charge got promoted and is now in charge of the January 6th investigation.
The guy in charge of the whole Detroit field office is now in charge of the whole Washington field office.
That is astonishing.
So with that, for the Lord loves wisdom, and from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. He guards the paths of justice, and he preserves the way of his saints. And then you will understand righteousness and justice, equity, and every good path. When wisdom enters your heart, and knowledge is pleasant to your soul, discretion will preserve you, understanding will keep you, to deliver you from the way of evil, from the man who speaks perverse things, from those who lead the paths of unrighteousness.